I introduce Glen Herud. He's going to talk about the do's and don'ts when innovating in dairy. Glen is a third-generation dairy farmer, and he founded a company, Happy Cow Milk Company, looking for a different way of going from paddock to plate. So we'll hear from Glen and his story. Thank you, Glen.
Thank you. Cheers. I didn't really think I'm very crazy, but the last few months I looked back at the last 3 years and I thought that was probably a little bit crazy. My thing is about how do we get young people into agriculture. As I'll go in later on, my view is that the dairy industry, particularly in New Zealand, is dominated by old dudes who have lots of land, and to try to get anyone to do anything different is really bloody hard, and that's really what my story is all about. So I was born in Rhodesia in 1978, hardcore dairy farmer, bought on a dairy farm. Robert Mugabe was in the middle of the Bush War, and Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, and my parents felt that there wasn't really a future for us in Zimbabwe. So my parents left the family farm there, so they didn't inherit that. I don't even know who has that at the moment. Robert's one of the war veterans, I think, have that. And they came and they started again in New Zealand, and I grew up the idyllic dairy boy lifestyle, shooting, fishing, hunting, doing everything you could in the 80s and the 90s before health and safety was really invented. And that's all I wanted to do, was be a dairy farmer. So I'm just going to look at my notes. And it was really at that time that the New Zealand public really respected dairy farmers. It's the backbone of the country now, and it certainly was back then. That's my dear mum. So 11 years after landing in New Zealand, my parents worked their way up through the dairy farming system, from managing to contract milking to share milking to buying more cows and a bigger share milking job, and then they bought a farm in Southland and converted it. And that's really what the New Zealand dairy industry is built upon. It's like, if you're prepared to work hard, you can get ahead. And I don't know if you actually can anymore. Now, you can work really hard, but whether you get there or not isn't what I'll talk about just now. So, looking back, I'm 40 now, and I look back, and there's certain periods of your life where you make a change and you don't actually realise how much that's going to affect your life until you look back. And for me, it was going to Lincoln University. And I didn't actually want to go to Lincoln University, but my parents were paying, and they sort of kicked me out the door and told me to do it. And I'm glad they did, because this is the first time in my life where I wasn't working my balls off. And I got to relax, and also started hanging out with people who weren't dairy farmers. And that was kind of good. I saw a different outlook on life, and I kind of liked slacking around and not doing much, and it kind of ruined me a little bit. But if I had stayed at home, I would have taken over the dairy farm, and in hindsight that would have been kind of good, because land prices weren't like that and I'd be a multi-millionaire now. But my wife would like that too. But that doesn't actually change anything. That doesn't solve the problems that we've got in the future. And if I had done that, I would be successful. I'd be thinking I'm pretty cool, based on the fact that property prices are going up. Not trying to have a dig at anyone who's got a farm and their property prices are going up. I started an appliance rentals business called Mr. Reynolds from Bribie Island, and started renting appliances, which I'm not passionate about, but I did it. Now here I was doing marketing, sales, and customer service. So basically, if I didn't get the phone to ring by advertising, we went broke. If I didn't make the sales, we went broke. And you become really, really customer focused when you're in that environment. And while this was going on, I noticed that public perception about farmers was changing. And no longer were farmers like those trusted people that we all look up to. They became, to some people, these rich people are getting rich on the back of the environment. And, you know, over this time, we've got 2.5 million extra dairy cows went in about a 15-year period. And people were starting to notice. Another thing we noticed, oh, actually, that is an ad that featured in the Guardian newspaper, and it was put there by a New Zealand animal welfare group who were not particularly interested in New Zealand's export earnings. But what they are interested about is the bobby calves, which we've heard a lot about today. And this is, I suppose, how do I explain it? We all say, oh yeah, people are more interested in, or more aware of animal welfare, but it's more than that. This is like, there's a fundamental shift in the way people are thinking in cities around the world, particularly Western world cities, and it's more than just, oh, we like animals, it's more than that. And I've been hanging out in swanky cafes for the last 3 years, and I believe animal welfare is the biggest threat to the global dairy industry, and I don't think dairy farmers really appreciate it. I know we've heard from SPCA today, and I think we get our backs up a little bit, and we think this is a little bit bullshit, but man, this is going to cripple the dairy industry if you don't address this and do it really well. So this is how many cows you need to buy 1 hectare of land. And it's an indication of how easy it is to work your way up the dairy system. So in '95, when my parents bought a farm, you needed 10 cows roughly to buy a hectare. Today, you need around 28 cows to buy 1 hectare of land. So what happens is the bar's raised higher if you're trying to get ahead. The green line is average herd size. And this is a typical story that's happening all around the world. Farms are getting bigger and bigger, and we all know why they're doing that. You need more economies of scale and so on. What surprised me a little bit was the grey line, which is the number of farms or the number of dairy farmers. So essentially we've got 25% less dairy farmers now, although we've got 2.5 million more cows. And this is really consolidation, basically. Farms are getting bigger and bigger. You could say the rich are getting richer. Depending on your political persuasion, you can tell all sorts of stories around that. And my question is, so where are the young farmers? And, you know, I just wonder, we've kind of created this system. We've got all sorts of different pressures coming from all angles. We've got the environmental pressures, we've got the animal welfare pressures, so that's all sort of going towards less intensive farming. Yet, dairy farmers are not making huge amounts of money. I mean, you don't need to tell everyone in this room. It's hard to make a buck dairy farming. And land prices, we could hold another talk about why land prices are so high, but really, are we going to encourage people to come into a dairy industry which has that sort of negative perception? Particularly if you're talking to someone to town. In New Zealand, we can't get a Kiwi to milk a cow. You know, we get them from the Philippines, and Brazil, and everywhere like that. Or if you're an immigrant and you need to get a job. Basically, you go milking cows and you go do something else. And that's not the industry that we should be. You know, there's so much great stuff about the dairy industry. So this is a graph that shows the value chain of an infant formula, tin of infant formula into China. And look, there's a little bit of debate about how accurate it is. It's a little bit old, but the gist of it is that, where's my button? That's what the farmer gets, that's what the processor gets. And this is indicative of, you know, heaps of products. Whether you're talking about my shirt, whether you're talking about an iPhone or a tin of infant formula, the farmer's sort of at the bottom of the scale. And a lot of you here, and a lot of the agri-tech and everything is trying to increase the productivity of that little sector there. So what we're getting is marginal increases. And I'm not suggesting you shouldn't do what you're doing, but this is where I see the massive opportunity for the future farmers of the world. And this is where I'd been working at Mr. Rentals peddling washing machines. And it's about how you get people to bring you, how you get people, when they're on the phone, tell them that renting your washing machine is going to change their life. And it's about sales and marketing. We don't get much of that when we talk to farmers. Farmers don't learn sales and marketing. In New Zealand, we expect Fonterra to do it. And I don't think that is a good way to go. So it's never been easier to sell your product. I didn't say it's easy, I just said it's never been easier. Because in the old days, like 15 years ago, the way you built a brand was you got lots of money, you paid a branding agency, create ads, you buy more ads, get lots of distribution, buy more ads, and you go round and round and round. And that only worked for big companies. If you were little, you couldn't really do that. How do you get found out? How do people hear about you? You know, you can't afford adverts in the Age or radio ads and things like that. The good news is that, how do you go back? That doesn't actually work anymore, which is great news for us, bad news for marketers. And that's because we've got so little time and we've got so many choices. And, you know, just here with our phones, we have, you know, perfectly customizable information device that we can get exactly what we're into. And we just scroll away, and I can control exactly what comes in here. And I only follow the people I'm interested in, only follow the subjects I'm interested in, and then all the algorithms are also pointing stuff that only we are likely to click on. And even at the end of the day, I fall asleep not having read everything I need to read in a day. So if you're trying to sell a product, advertising or yelling at people through ads doesn't work anymore. And this is related to farming. So I read a book called The Purple Cow, which has nothing to do with the dairy industry. But basically the premise is you're driving around, you see cows, and cows are boring. You and I may differ on that, but most people think cows are boring. If you saw a purple cow, you would stop and you go, oh, there's a purple cow, because that is remarkable. And the word remarkable it means it's worth remarking about. So it's worth whipping out your phone, Instagramming it and sharing it. You'll talk about it when you get to work. So if you're going to build a business, you've got to be shareable. The actual product that you're building has to be remarkable. You can't take an average product, do some fancy marketing and ship it out like you used to. The old bell curve. Basically, you don't want to deal with those people. Those people are average people who want average products at an average price. And, you know, that's how I think about my socks or my underwear or something like that. That's probably $1 milk. Oops. What you need to do, obviously, is go for the, you know, your early adopters and things like that. They're the people who care. And it doesn't matter what product category you are, whether it's shoes, some people really care about shoes, some people don't. Cars, whatever. Whatever product you're into, you need to aim for those early people. So for us, at the Happy Cow Milk, with taking in all this information while I'm renting washing machines, I'm thinking, how do we get customer focused? What are the customers? They're giving us feedback here. Let's give them what they want. They don't want bobby calves, so we leave all our calves on their mothers, which is what Bob just said is the right thing to do, I think. People say to me, oh, I couldn't calve 365 days a year. That must be so hard, Glenn. It's not. The cow calves, I tag it, and then I leave it. That's the end of it. It just feeds off mum. You see what 2-wire fences? Calves just go wherever they want. They know where their mum is. They'll come back when they're ready. And we leave them on there for about 10 to 15 weeks, depending on age. And chicks love it. What do you guys? That is a really good thing to say if you're looking after the baby calves. The other thing is reusable glass bottles. So in New Zealand, we're frantic about the single-use plastic issue, and it's really, really hard for a big company to get rid of single-use plastic. But when you're little, you can actually have reusable glass bottles, and this is a purple cow. So I went around with this wonderful plan of how I was going to go and set up this milk company, and I approached all my dairy farmer mates. And I give them my pitch, and that's basically the look I got. So, I don't know if you know Andrew Hoggard. If you Google dairy farmer, that's his image comes up. And that's a perfect, that's just exactly what they look at me like. They're like, are you, I don't get it. He looks like Andrew. Yeah, it does. And they're unimpressed. They're like, I don't know, no. There's a few things to it. First of all, if I was on mum and dad's farm and I just made $1 million in 5 years from capital gain, I'd probably be thinking I was crazy too. The other thing is that in New Zealand we're such a seasonal supply dairy system. You know, we peak in, I think our milk peaks in October, and we virtually have no milk in the winter. So it's actually difficult for them to use our system. So I thought, well, if we're going to do this, I'm going to have to build my own little shed. And I didn't really have enough money. So I built this mobile cow shed. And what that enabled us to do is set up the test farm to test our happy cow model. And basically, we can then go onto any block of land and start milking cows, whether it's dry land, sheep, beef, cropping. You don't need resource consent, don't need effluent systems, just basically that's what you've got. That was my second milking. Goes pretty well. Those were, I bought 8 heifers, and what's the other thing? It rains in New Zealand. We had no money for a roof. So anyway, I didn't want to invent the wheel, I just wanted to test the mobile milking system. So I went to Fonterra and I said, would you take my milk? If Andrew Hoggard wasn't that impressed, Fonterra was not at all impressed with a guy who runs an appliance rental business with a trailer wants us to supply milk. They were like, They've got 30 to 40 dairy conversions going on in Canterbury at that time. You know, these are 800 to 1,000 cow dairy conversions. They don't want to mess around with some trailer in a paddock for 60 cows. So I figured, well, I've come this far, I may as well just process my own milk. So I borrowed my cousin's cheese vat and I built a little processing room. And if farmers were not impressed, Fonterra was not impressed, the Ministry of Primary Industries, when I turned up with this, were nauseous at the idea of it. A mobile trailer, they're like, the water sources, the hazards, and this went on and on and on. And this is when I realised that most people in the food safety industry are so conservative. But I did what I needed to do, I did what they asked, I built my own custom risk management program, and I could probably talk all day about that process. But eventually the 40-year-old virgins in the high-vis vest actually signed off my RMP. And we started selling milk. And you know all that stuff I talked about, purple cows, appealing to the early adopters, targeting who you are? Well, you know what? It works. From day one, I was on national TV, national radio, newspapers, blogs, you name it. And I was just everywhere. And I kind of like that. And it just gets to the point now where a reporter rings up, another bloody reporter. And this is because you're remarkable. There's no one else doing reusable glass bottles. There's no one else leaving their calves with their mothers. And it's the messaging that it sends. Are we very different? Forget the mobile cow shed. Leaving calves with their mothers, is it that different to what everyone else does? Has everyone else talked about fertiliser use or anything like that? But what it does is it projects, well, really it's what it's projecting out into the market. Not quite there yet. So, you would expect that I'm dominating the New Zealand milk market. Well, I went to all those dairy farmers and I said, finally I've tested it, look, it works. The chicks love me, the cows and the calves are happy, we've got this working system, it's working, let's ramp this thing up, let's go. And deathly silence. I've got no takers. I said, come on, there's 6.5 million cows in New Zealand. Will someone just help me out with 100 cows? I'll pay you and everything. I'm not asking for a free ride. I need some land because I haven't got $1 million to buy land. Let's just partner up and make this happen. And I wasn't able to make that happen in Canterbury. So I went to professional investors. Oh shit, I'm running out of time. Anyway, basically, I shut the business down. I didn't have the money, shut the business down, and the crowd fired up. And I don't know if any of you know what it's like to have something go viral. It's like you put your phone on the table and it vibrates for 24 hours. Gets to about 10 o'clock, and then the other side of the world wake up and it starts vibrating. And the crowd, the people who love what we were doing, said, this is bollocks, we're not going to have this. And I said, well, I'll keep building Happy Cow Milk, but I need to get a job, or you can help me out. So basically I've got 626 people who are donating anywhere for $3.50 to $100 a month so that I can keep rebuilding the Happy Cow Milk business, which is what I'm doing. So basically what you need to do, take inspiration from other industries, going direct to the consumer. If you're going to build a business that you just copy other milk businesses, where you milk cows, pasteurize milk, bottle milk, distribute it and go through the supermarkets, you're not going to make any money, because big companies don't actually make any money doing that. So we're building a direct-to-consumer model, and essentially what we're experimenting with is becoming the back end that enables farmers to supply their local market. And there's a lot in that. It's basically a cloud-based system that takes into account all the compliance that farmers have to deal with all the MPI and all those sorts of things, coupled with a distribution model that is super efficient, and also the marketing. So that is the Happy Cow Milk, and we've run out of time.
Thank you very much, Glen.
Thank you.
So, don't run away. Don't run away. Don't run away. One question. Time for one question. I made him don't run away. So one question, please. Yes, Tony.
Are you looking to franchise into Australia?
Well, franchising is the old way of doing it. I think this would be, you could just bolt into the system. Yeah. But anyone in the world can use the system, because really it's the knowledge, and it's someone actually, well, I haven't got enough time to go into it, but it's actually what we're exporting the system, we're exporting the knowledge of how to do it and exporting the support, because if you're trying to do that yourself, with milking cows and delivering milk and everything like that, it's just too much. So, yeah.
Thank you, Glen.
Thank you.